Robot Talk is the podcast that sits down with robot enthusiasts from around the world and asks them the questions you always wanted answered. Like, why are we building humanoid robots? And how does that thing work?
Hello everyone, welcome to Robot Talk. We're live at the Great Exhibition Road Festival in London for a very special episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Claire Asher, and today I'll be chatting to Ben Russell, Maryam Banitalebi Dehkordi, and Petar Kormushev about humanoid robots. My first guest is Ben Russell, Curator of Mechanical Engineering at the Science Museum. He's curated 6 permanent galleries and temporary exhibitions at the museum, including Robots in 2017, which explored the 500-year story of humanoid robots. Please welcome to the stage Ben Russell.
Hello.
Hi Ben, great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about the history of humanoid robots? You know, when did this obsession with building robots in the human form begin?
It's the question is, how far can you go? So you always tend to think with robots, they're a sci-fi thing. There is something which is the last 40, 50 years, say, but then you start to explore a little bit further. So I'm a historian. I'm upfront about it. I'm not an engineer or scientist. I'm a historian of technology, and so you tend to go back. And so, you look at the normal robots which are around now, robots which are for jobs that you might call the 4D tasks, jobs that are dull, dumb, dirty, or dangerous. You think, okay. And then you go back to the 50s, you get robots treated as sort of film stars, that sort of thing. You go back to the 18th and 19th centuries, the Industrial Revolution. Robots, cybernetic mechanisms, machines that think, used in factories, doing things like spinning cotton. And then you go back a bit further. You go back to the 17th century, chess-playing robots, automatons that can write and draw. And then it gets really weird, and you start to look at religious robots. If you go back to the 15th century, if you go to the Deutsches Museum in Munich, for example, there's 4 or 5 of these things we found, tiny automatons that pray. Automatons of Jesus on the crucifix. Even in Milan, I found an automaton of Satan. It was terrifying. This terrifying thing with big boggling eyes. And
Is that one of the pictures you showed?
I think he might well be up there,
This one?
There he is, yeah. And basically, it's got an organ inside it. It would scream, and it's got big boggling eyes. It would look at you, and it's like, and it's quite scary. So there's a long tradition of us building machines that are lifelike or seemingly alive, which was kind of fascinating.
Do you want to talk about the other pictures you shared?
Yeah.
So this one I cannot make any sense of.
No. So occasionally, if you're a museum curator, you spend much more time looking at spreadsheets and sitting at a desk than people expect, but you do get a bit Indiana Jones sometimes. So this was a company in North London called Shadow Robot. They make the most incredible human hands, or robot
like
equivalents. Bionic hands, incredible. Same movements as a human hand. And at the end of sort of 2 hours talking about hands, they said, we think we've got a humanoid in the basement somewhere. And I went, tell me more. And so we went down to the basement. We went under the stairs. There was a sort of chasm in the foundations. The roof had collapsed. And there's all sorts of old boxes of rubbish and stuff. We pulled them out of the way. And then a pair of feet appeared, which you can just see at the bottom there. Yeah. It was like being Howard Carter when he excavated the tombs of the pharaohs. He's sort of peering in with a torch and going, oh. So I sort of yanked it out by its legs, and eventually we got it stood up, and it was a bit mangled. But it actually turned out to be the first robot outside Japan to have been able to stand up and walk without falling over, which is quite amazing. And it was hidden in a basement in North London. So you occasionally have these lovely moments of discovery.
Wonderful. And what about this one?
This is a guy. Actually, Owen Holland, he's a roboticist. He had an idea. He said, what happens? How does a brain develop inside a body? That's what we all do when you grow up. Your brain and your body are developing, side by side. And how does that work? And does the shape of the body affect how your brain develops? And so what they did, he with a guy called Rob Knight, built this body. It's called Etchybot. I won't go into the side of it. But basically, it was like many modern robots, it's actually an experiment in how minds work and how minds evolve. What they did, they took Gray's Anatomy, which is the main sort of anatomy textbook.
Not the TV show.
No, definitely not. Well, interesting. They took that and they literally modelled a human body out of plastic, which sets where it goes hard, and they basically put a sort of a robot brain inside it, and they just saw how it kind of worked. It was incredibly lifelike. It always reminds me of Bishop in the first Alien film, actually. It's really weird. You think a robot would be sort of shiny and silver, but it's white. And you think, that's odd, isn't it?
So why do you think we have this obsession with creating mechanical versions of humans?
I think one of our uniquely human properties is our tendency to see life in things that aren't actually living. So I suppose the technical word is anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
And it's fairly typical of me. I spent 5 years working on a project where I have difficulty pronouncing the word that it's about. But basically, it's about the ability to see life in non-living things, machines, you name it. And we're fascinated by ourselves.
Yeah.
If you're at the science museums, the medical galleries are some of the most popular ones because it's about your body, what goes wrong, how you fix it with medicine. And it seems to me that actually, you build a humanoid robot because actually, we're quite sort of inward-looking as beings. Humans tend to think about themselves and their bodies, and you think, I've just did that. How did I do that? And so you tend to model it. When you want to understand something, you build a model of it. It could be a 3D, a physical thing. It could be a computer simulation. And it's just what we do as humans. Yeah. As far as I can tell.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an element of vanity involved as well.
Yes. What makes us different from the other beings we share the planet with? As far as I know, I haven't seen any badgers reconstructing badgers in robot form. But
let me know if you do.
Well, that'd be, again, a good discovery.
Fantastic. So I'd like to invite my second guest to come and join the conversation. Maryam Banitalebi Dehkordi is a senior lecturer in robotics and AI at the University of Hertfordshire. Her expertise spans humanoid robots, assistive robots, industrial robots, and outdoor autonomous vehicles. Please give Maryam a very warm welcome. Hi, Maryam. Lovely to have you on Robot Talk.
Hello. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Claire, for having us here today.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing with humanoid robots?
Absolutely. So, my research is in the area of human-robot interaction and how robots can engage with humans in real-world environments. So one area that I have been exploring is to use robots, human robots, in assistive roles, in assistive robotics, let's say. Especially in the fields of healthcare and also educational. So we have looked at non-verbal communications such as gaze or gestures to make the interaction between human and robots more natural and less intimidating, which is very important for cases like autistic children and also people with dementia. In addition to that, I have been exploring explainable robotics and human-robot teaming, which means that we aim to improve how robots perceive and adapt to human behavior. For example, in a collaborative task, so we want the robot to tell when human is struggling or confused. And more importantly, we need the robot to step in at the right moment to help people. For that, we have combined sensors and machine learning methods and also human-inspired approaches, for example, gathering the data of human gaze and so. And finally, currently I'm writing a book with a focus on the relationship between human and humanoid robots. And it has been a great way to explore more emotional and also ethical dimensions of what it means to create the robot in the form of human. And it's the way to reflect our research, our real-world research, in a storytelling way.
Sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
So, I mean, obviously robots come in many different forms. Do you think that people find it easier to work with or to relate to robots that are kind of humanoid?
Great question. And I would say it depends. Having the robot that has the shape and form of a human can be effective because they look familiar, they look like us. So it will initiate the interaction easier. On the other side, at the same time, it could be the double-edged sword. So because they look like human, people expect them to behave exactly like human.
Yeah.
And they can't, they are robots. And if they don't, for example, if timing or tone is off, then it can feel awkward or unsettling. The phenomenon that's called the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
And on the other side, for a simpler and task-oriented work, for example, the robotic arm at industrial setting, just think of that. So we don't need to have humanoids. We can have something that serves that task exactly. But for something like social robotics or assistive robotics, having the humanoid robot can be extremely effective, especially if carefully we design and balance how familiar it is, how human-like is it, and also that again the task-oriented. If we can balance that, so they can serve us beautifully.
So you brought with you this cute little Now robot that sat next to me. Do you want to briefly tell us a little bit about this robot?
So at the University of Hertfordshire, we have the robot house, which is a 4-bedroom house, and the ground floor is where we have lots of humanoid robots living together. And we do lots of research there, thanks to our robotic group. So we have a few of them here, Pepper, Fetch, Kerbot 4, and we have Now robot with us here. We have a few of them.
Fantastic. So my third guest today is Petar Kormushev, Director of the Robot Intelligence Lab at Imperial College London and Associate Professor in Robotics at the Dyson School of Design Engineering. Petar is working on artificial intelligence for robots to allow them to learn by themselves and adapt to changing environments. His machine learning algorithms have been applied to a variety of humanoid robots. So please welcome Petar to the stage. Hi Petar, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, Claire.
So you've brought a robot along with you called Robot De Niro. Can you tell us a little bit about this robot and the work that you've been doing with him?
Sure. Yes, so at Imperial, I had the Robot Intelligence Lab. So we're looking at ways to make robots more capable, more intelligent, to acquire skills, to perform different tasks in the real world. And this is one of our robots that we use for our research. It's not a typical robot that you would see somewhere outside the research lab. It's full of lots of different sensors, and it's made in such a way that it's easy for us to add and remove different sensors and actuators to try out and test different hypotheses and do experiments with. So it's pretty heavy robots, it's 200 kilos, but it has so many different sensors, including LiDARs, 3D laser scanners, RGBD sensors, and lots of sensors distributed along the body, so it can feel not just its own position in space, but also the forces and torques when it touches the environment. So for that reason, we called it De Niro for design engineering's natural interaction robot, because it is really good at interacting with objects and people.
Sure. And you made a point of giving it a hat and a little face, because I guess that makes it even better at interacting with people.
Sure, it's easier to recruit the subjects for experiments when the robot looks a bit more cute.
Sure.
Yes.
So, can you talk a little bit about how advances in AI are helping to make robots that can learn and adapt to the messy, unpredictable world that humans live in?
Yes. So as humans, of course, we have our human intelligence, and lots of things that we do, we take it for granted, and we don't really think how difficult it is actually to replicate such a thing in a machine. So if you pick anyone and ask them which one is more difficult, playing chess at the grandmaster level or bringing a glass of water from the kitchen, probably most people would pick the chess, but actually we solved that long time ago, and we are still struggling to get a robot to bring us something from the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit unusual that we have that. So often, as Ben earlier was saying, in order to understand something, you try to build a model of it, you try to replicate it, try to truly understand how it works. So that's what we are trying to achieve with robots like De Niro. So we want to see what does it take to create a robot that can learn to perform new tasks from observing people doing it or from trying on its own. So a lot of tasks can be learned by imitation learning, so observing a few demonstrations and then trying to replicate it. But there are things that cannot be learned that way. So imagine a human sitting and watching YouTube the whole day, watching YouTube videos of people ice skating or skiing. Well, no matter how long you watch, you wouldn't be able to become an expert at skiing until you try it for yourself, right? Yeah. So these kind of skills, they're very difficult to transfer. They're almost non-transferable skills. You have to learn it by yourself, by your own experience, right? So this is where the role of reinforcement learning comes.
Okay.
So it's a type of machine learning approach where the robot is learning on its own by trial and error. So trying and attempting many different ways to achieve some goal and figuring out by itself which strategy works, which one doesn't work, until it can successfully reach the goal. So these approaches are the ones that we are mostly using in my lab to try to teach robots skills, either by imitation or by self-learning.
Sure. Yeah. And then we have a few pictures of you hanging out with the robot De Niro.
Yeah, luckily the robot has full torque sensing, so it knows exactly how much force it's applying. Yeah.
What are you wearing in this? What is your weird backpack?
This is a passive exoskeleton that I'm wearing. So it's used to teleoperate the robot and to also can be used as a teaching interface, basically to demonstrate a task for dual arm manipulation, let's say. And then the robot can learn from those demonstrations and then try to do it autonomously.
I see, okay. And then this is a different humanoid.
Yeah, this is slightly scary humanoid, much taller and heavier than me. It was one of the robots that we participated with at the DARPA Robotics Challenge. So this kind of robot, it's also humanoid, right? But it's not the kind of robot you'd want in your tiny home normally.
No, probably not.
It's not very safe, yes. So it's better to stay well away from it for now until it gets better at balancing and safety in general.
Yeah, and I mean it doesn't have a hat, so it's just not a patch on Robot De Niro.
Sure.
Fantastic. Okay, so now let's open up the discussion for everyone on the panel, and we'll start taking audience questions in a few moments. I'd like to start the group discussion by talking a little bit about the applications of humanoid robots. So what tasks or jobs do you think humanoid robots are well suited to, and what things do you think we maybe shouldn't be using humanoids for?
So the one which is already proved that has been effective is for healthcare, for elderly care, and also for children with autism. There has been lots of studies that prove that they have been effective for people with dementia also. And also anything for social robotics and assistive robotics. I would say there are lots of room for improvement, and they are very promising areas. In my opinion, the part which could be tricky is to have the robot around children, which for safety and ethical issues, maybe there should be still lots of study to make sure how we need them to be around the children, in which setting, for what reason, and how it can impact the children, I mean, in the long term.
Yeah.
So obviously, these are the first generation that's going to grow up alongside the robots in the same way that the generation before them has been, in touch with smartphones. And so this is something that we will understand over time, the good and bad sides of that.
Yeah.
I think there's something about, if we're going to have robots, do they have to look like us?
Well, exactly.
And I think, when you think about, I imagine pretty much every person in the room at this point has got a smartphone. Yeah? Probably better than mine. Mine is very old-fashioned in comparison. But when you think about it, you can talk to that. It does all sorts of stuff for you. Does it need to have a human form? Chances are, I suspect that it's already out there in the most useful form it will have. Yeah. Unless there's massive developments in ChatGPT and all that sort of thing, how that applies to robots over the next few years.
What do you think, Petar?
I can add something. Every year I run a robotics ethics debate with my students, and we discuss things like that. Okay, what would you be comfortable or not comfortable having a robot do for you, right? And something that surprised me last time, they were saying, "Oh, I don't want a personal trainer that is a robot because they'll be like grueling, not get tired at all." So it's the opposite of what the factory manager would want. Workers that just work non-stop without getting tired. And the other thing is, there are a lot of children here, right? So who would like to have a robotic babysitter, for example? I'm curious, how many of the parents here actually will be comfortable leaving their children with a robotic babysitter at home? Any takers?
No.
Yeah?
Not one. Yeah, I mean, it seems like in the last year or two, there are just constant new advances in humanoid robots. There are so many companies out there that are constantly putting out videos and new examples of their latest humanoid, and they have them working in factories and doing all these jobs that I'm like, why does it need to be a humanoid to do that,
I would be very suspicious of, you see, okay, Boston Dynamics, for example, one of the big American companies, all these amazing films of them running across country and that, and you think, well, it's quite impressive, but you never know how many attempts they had before that it fell over, or it went wrong, or burst into flames, or exploded. But they never show you that. So there's a certain amount of smoke and mirrors with humanoid robots, I think.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, let's take some questions from the audience. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. The one at the back was the very first hand, so let's have the microphone over there, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Stephen Madrell. I'm a friend of Imperial College here. I'm deeply concerned about the accelerating militarization of artificial intelligence. In particular, what are the geopolitical and ethical implications of the development of AI-powered robots? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We're starting off with quite a heavy topic. Who would like to dive into that?
That's a bit of a hot potato subject. But yeah, what I would say, my 2 cents on the topic, basically, any advanced technology can be used more or less for military purposes as well, or dual use. So robots are not an exception. And I would say maybe AI is even a bigger thing that can be applied in that context. So as a policy in my lab, for example, I never get involved directly in any military-related projects. But that doesn't mean that the technology couldn't be applied or used. And as researchers, it's our job to publish the research we do publicly, and it's publicly available to anyone, which is a necessity for the purpose of scientific scrutiny, right? Our research needs to be peer-reviewed to have value. But on the other hand, it basically makes the research leak, and that cannot be avoided. So it's a very difficult topic. Yeah, no solutions from my side.
Yeah. This is the kind of technology is neutral argument, I guess.
Can I tell you a story? Would you mind? I was in Hammersmith. Hammersmith is the World Centre of Robots last week. There was a big conference there. And there's a guy came on in front of a whole room of people like this. And he said, I'm going to do a very, very boring talk now. We went, oh. So I'm going to talk about robot safety. And he said, basically made the point, old forms of robots, you have a digital model of the robot, so you know what the robot's going to do, and then you have the actual robot. And if those two things are different, then you can just stop the robot safely. But he said, look, if you think about humanoid robots, if it's running or it's walking in a room full of people or children or whatever, if you just say, hit the stop button, first thing it's going to do is it's going to fall over and squash someone. Also, with AI, you can't predict what it's going to do next. And he said, I'm going to do a demonstration of this. He pulled out a kitchen knife. He said, what I'm going to do, this robot here, which came on stage, I'm going to get this robot to attack me. We've designed some software which we think should be able to stop this robot from attacking me. Now, we're all sitting up like this now. Like, this isn't boring. This is really interesting. And then almost inevitably, for live demonstrations like that, it went horribly wrong, and the software didn't stop the robot. So yeah, aside from the geopolitical implications, I think at an individual level, if the tech doesn't work, there's all sorts of implications for that.
Yeah, this is why we need inflatable robots like Baymax in Big Hero 6.
Absolutely. Soft robots.
Yes. Maryam, do you have anything to add to the geopolitical conversation?
Just about this ethical part, so I would say that like other technologies, once it finds its position, which is finding nowadays rapidly, so we will get to that point that political things and media will get involved, and it will shape the way that the general public think about that, and it might change the direction that it will go in future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the wonderful question. Got an arm here in the middle.
Another geopolitical question. One of the factors is that the industrialized world is suffering a population problem. How is the acquisition of humanoid robots going to compete with the nations that suddenly realize that maybe maintaining humanoid robots is too expensive, so we might as well just increase human populations?
That's another very deep question, thank you.
How will you deal with that problem?
I have a comment that addresses partially what you're saying. So if we take Japan as an example, they have a huge population problem, right? They have declining birth rate, and they're really struggling. They have a huge percentage of bachelors who don't want to get married and have children. So I think the government there is taking some extreme measures. So they're introducing tax on bachelors. So if you're not married, you don't have children, you have to pay extra tax. Yeah, and it's interesting because, Japanese society in general, they are very fond of robotics and technology. They have very high acceptance rate of such new technologies. And they have had humanoid robots, including full-size walking humanoid robots for a long time. Ever since Asimo started walking, the robot from Honda, humanoid robot. So quite an interesting example as a country compared to others. Yeah.
Definitely. Anyone else want to add to that?
When you look at it, you think, why would you build a robot when actually there's an awful lot of perfectly good people out there who can do jobs? Well, that's all what people have generally tended to say. I remember someone said to me a while ago, they said, actually, if you look at the EU, the working age population is going to decline by about 60 million in the next decade. It's a huge drop. And so a lot of people are saying, well, actually, here's an opportunity. What they're saying is that, you might describe these as jobs which are going unfilled. They're not jobs. Actually, they're just tasks. They're repetitive. They're boring. No one wants to do them, even if there were people around. The big challenge for the robot makers is, can you build robots at a price? Can you scale up? They're not £250,000 each, they're relatively cheap, sufficiently cheap that you can actually take them up and adopt them. And of course, that's fraught with difficulty in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. This comes back to the kind of the dull, dirty, dangerous tasks you mentioned at the beginning. There's, for me, the most compelling argument for building robots is to do jobs that are really dangerous. But then do we need a humanoid to do that? I think maybe there's very few examples where it really needs to have a human form.
And there's quite a bit that's said about having robots coming in and taking over that sort of work. And again, a lot of people saying, a lot of the manufacturers saying, we want to make robots that allow humans to be more human. But there's a disconnect, because when you look at how AI is being used, It's being used to automate painting, creativity, storytelling, all that sort of stuff. The sorts of things that people might actually want to go and do if they weren't working all the time.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect between what the roboticists are saying and what the AI people are saying, and a mismatch between what the likely outcomes of that are, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Shall we take another question?
How many robots are in the world?
Oh, good question. Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Definitely. Including industrial robots
I think
will be
it
the
depends
dominant number.
what counts as a robot, right?
Like they count vacuum cleaners and other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Am I audible? So my question is around kids and the next generation, we are raising. How little or how widely we can expose them in terms of AI. On top of that, that is the robotics is enhancing at a super speed with the AI in picture, right? And, I have seen the days where ChatGPT was hallucinating. And now if you see the results, they are amazing in terms of every aspect. And this will be at lightning speed, it will grow. So the exposure to the kids, especially the growing ones, how we can build the positive environment in the home where they can take the best advantage, and also at the same time we can control that what cannot be done or what's not good to be done. So simple example, if I tell my daughter in the evening that after 6 it's not good to eat chocolate or have a hot chocolate, she won't listen, or says no, that can't be true. But say, let's ask Gemini. And if Gemini says the similar thing, she would listen and she would do as the Gemini is saying. So sometimes it worries me that, when they grow up and their social skills is the first thing to ask a robo or a digital robo in a way that they would rely on them and not the near ones or the dear ones or the loved ones, which they are talking to. So will that be future very soon?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's worry, or it could be a good thing. I don't know, but I'm finding the answers.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on that. And what I've noticed is there are some skills that are slowly disappearing, such as handwriting, right? I mean, it's not only children, it's adults as well. I mean, how often do you have to write by hand nowadays, right? So, yeah, unfortunately, there's not much to do. My personal policy about this is, it's okay to expose kids to state-of-the-art things, as long as it's moderated, right, by parents. And also, my observation is that kids are completely they're super brave, right? And they're not afraid to try new technology and come to the robot and push it or kick it and see what happens next, right? They don't ask for permission, they do it first. So they're natural explorers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm also a mother of 2, and I would say it is a valid concern. Not only about robotic, about any technology that we have. So robots are here to stay, like any other technology or even thought. Anything that invent, it will stay forever. And the challenge is not about the robot itself. It is about how we are going to integrate that into society. And I think as it's growing, as it's integrating more and more in our daily lives, there will be more study and maybe even more jobs that will deal with this type of concern and will facilitate living alongside these robots in sense of ethical, emotional, and other aspects.
Yeah, I guess, coming back to what you mentioned earlier about children with autism, there are a lot of roles for robots that can be really educational and really beneficial.
Yes.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions?
You mentioned about using robots in healthcare, and particularly with regards to dementia. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit further, and particularly with regard, I guess, to humanoid robots, how that's actually working, or how you see that evolving, given that we do have an ageing population and things like dementia and Alzheimer's are seemingly increasing a lot?
Great question, thank you.
Yes, I'm not an expert in dementia, but about the robotic side. At the moment, the plan is to have robots to help the carers and the nurses and to support them, let's say. For example, in working with elderly, the hard part, which is the repetitive task, or for example, heavy lifting task, or these type of things, we can make the robot to do them. And the part, for example, the emotional part, the emotional support part, the counseling things, and the human part, we can leave for human carers. Another idea that is a debate at the moment, whether it is ethical to do that or not, is that, for example, for aging people who remember beloved ones, it could be the past spouse, or it could be the childhood of their children. I mean, children are grown now, but the parent remembered them as when they were a child. They can't remember them as the age that they are. So one idea is to replicate that face for them and to see if it can help them, if it can accommodate them, because usually they can't remember the current faces of their families or even their carers. So every day when they face the new face, it might, make them uncomfortable to see someone new. But if we can have the robot that look like the familiar face, it can help them. Still, there are lots of debates on that, whether it is ethical to do that.
I think if I can add on to that, I think there's something, coming back to the subject of the session today, is about, does a robot that's looking after someone with dementia have to be humanoid? And one of the best robots I saw wasn't we're all obsessed with the humanoid robots, but actually the best one I saw was actually a walking frame with a chair across it which you push, and it had a screen on it and a camera which could keep an eye on that person's gait, see if they're getting tired, it can monitor their posture, but also it could just, it's very simple. It was all made up, with bits put together with gaffer tape and just as an experiment. But it could sort of say, where do you want to go to in your house, and sort of remind them of, you've come to this room to cook some lunch, for example, and just very simple things like that. And again, it was a very functional machine. It wasn't a humanoid, and I think that's probably made it better, actually. It was very effective at what it did.
Yeah, there's a very popular robot that has been used for people with dementia or in care homes. It's a seal, and I think, people obviously don't expect it to have the capabilities of a human, but a lot of people found it very comforting. You could kind of pet it and interact with it. So I think they don't necessarily have to be humanoid. It depends what you want them to do. Maybe if you want them to make you a cup of tea, then a humanoid with arms is more useful than a seal. We'll take a question from the front.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for interesting talk. So you mentioned adaptation in your research field. I was wondering, we have seen so many types of humanoid robots and other types of the robot. We designed this robot and we control the behavior. We connected them nowadays to the AI, and we let them function in a society. So that's the purpose, right? So is there any way to measure the reaction of people, internally, not by filling up the questionnaires, a reaction to this technology, if it is they have long-term effect, or if they have any mentally influenced people? Is there any way to measure that? Yeah or not?
Good question, thank you.
Very specific question, yeah. Well, I can tell you from my personal experience what I have been involved with. So some of the research that we did in the past was about prosthetic hands, for example. And in those cases, you actually put physiological sensors to measure different reaction of the body, physical reaction of the body, right? So you can measure things like the impedance on the skin. So if the human patient becomes very nervous about using this robotic equipment, their skin resistance changes. And of course, you can use fitness trackers and whatnot to try to measure their level of stress. So that's one way to do, the measuring side of your question. But for the long-term effect, I have no idea about that. Yeah, that is. I don't think anyone has done such study.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed a psychologist a while back who was doing very much that, studying how people felt and their pulse and their brain activity when they were interacting with a robot. But they were, like you said, short-term studies. I don't think that she was, because it's very hard to, to keep tracking that for months or years over time as somebody working with a robot.
Yeah. And things are changing so quickly.
Exactly.
The children we have at the moment, we don't even, the jobs that they'll be doing as adults, they don't exist yet, probably.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When was the first robot invented?
Oh.
That's a great question.
It always depends on what's a robot.
Exactly.
I would say the first robot, in the modern sense of being a sort of humanoid robot, in the way we see them now, is probably Eric the robot, who was built by Edward Raphael in Surrey in about 1928, just after Maria was in the film Fritz Lang film's Metropolis. This amazing central character was a robot, and he said, "I'm going to build one of those." And it was a piece of showmanship, effectively, a piece of theatre. Many other people have a similar idea at the same sort of time. And ultimately, it actually gets blown up in a garage during the war. But it has a very short and eventful life. But I would say, for the first modern robot, I would say then, 1928. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm curious about De Niro, like how you go about training it in terms of AI. Like how long would it take to train? And then, like once you have the model for one robot, can you take that model and use it on another robot? And also, do you have like attended training or unattended training? And like with LLMs, they're using like supercomputers almost, to training, like the brute force kind of training. Surely that can't work for these kind of robots.
Okay, great questions. I think I had one image among the photos in the presentation that was showing a dual-arm passive exoskeleton. Yes. So here, what we are doing is we are teaching the robot how to do something by teleoperating it first. So human is performing the task by teleoperating the robot, right? So this way, the robot gets to experience what it is to be doing the task firsthand almost, right? Because it can use its own sensors to detect the position, velocities, torques, forces while it's doing the task. So by using machine learning approaches such as imitation learning, right, we can start building a database of skills that allow the robot to learn individual things and then try to generalize them. Now that is tricky. How do you generalize? Part of your question was about transferring to other robots, right? So this is transferability of skills. Another thing is learning skills that are difficult to demonstrate remotely, right? So things that are requiring more dynamic execution require the robot to learn on its own, right? So for that purpose, we use different machine learning approaches, such as reinforcement learning. So the large language models that you mentioned in your questions, they are useful when we have to have some verbal interface to connect with the human, but they cannot really help for the physical task execution, right? So there are other recent approaches that we have been looking at to use for that, so such as a vision language model or vision language action model that is trying to link images with human language, with actions to be executed on the robot. So try to learn this kind of combined multimodal inputs and outputs. So it's a new technology and it has its flaws, yet it's not perfect. But very often you can transfer things from one robot to another if you have extensive simulations of both robots and you do something called domain randomization, basically doing lots and lots and lots of repetitions with small variations every time so that the robot gets to experience slight changes in the task. What happens if the object is slightly heavier? What happens if the path is slightly different? So after so many different variations, the robot becomes more robust to execute the task in the real world, where, as you know, things are not deterministic, but there's always some randomness involved. Yeah. So that is the current best practice, I would say, in this area.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, we have time for one very quick question.
So, roughly how long will it be before robots become a regular part of people's lives?
That's a great question. That's one I've been wondering myself.
If I may, I think it's entirely up to you. I think it's very important that a lot of the discussion is framed in terms of technology will come along and affect your life. It will change your life. Technology drives society. Actually, completely the wrong way to go about it. Actually, it's the other way around. Society shapes technology. There's a very, very strong element of choice in what happens with robots and AI. There's always this feeling, there's this slightly terrifying thing coming at you. But if you don't want it, there's a choice. You can say no. You don't have to have it. You can have it when you're ready. And you're consumers. If you don't want to have something, or you want it when you feel you're ready, then you can do that. And that's a decision that's going to be made by millions and millions and millions of consumers of this tech. So it's not really a case of saying it might be 5 years and everyone will have one. Actually, there's much more flexibility about that.
I think it also depends. I mean, robots are kind of already a part of our everyday lives in the sense that back home I have a robot vacuum cleaner. And that's all it does. It just does the vacuuming, and I love it because I don't have to do it. The question of when humanoid robots might become part of our everyday lives, I think, is much harder to answer. But would anybody else like to have a go?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to autonomous driving cars. As Ben was saying, some people would just say no, they will not be comfortable getting in an autonomous car. So yeah, people have the ultimate choice. But yeah, not long ago in human history, nobody had personal computers, right? It was only mainframe computers. And at that time, people were saying, okay, in the future, every single family will have a personal computer at home. Well, yeah, that point happened. And now we have phones that are just as powerful as the huge room-sized computers back in the day. So yeah, more or less, I think it's inevitable to have personal humanoid robot in every home one day.
Yeah. One day. I think that's a way off at this point.
So my opinion is it has different aspects. The first thing is affordability. So we should reach to the point that people can pay for having personal humanoid robots. The other thing is about the mechanical aspects of that. I mean, AI is very good now, it's increasing, but mechanical thing is, still need lots of advancement to have something that be safe around human. Because, for example, the care robot that we had in one of the images, when it's opened the arms, it will get 2 meters from these fingers, that's one. And just you have seen that your computer stopped working or your smartphone, and you need to wait for a while, you restart that. Imagine if that happened with your huge robot. So it can be dangerous around you, even if it is just for a few seconds that, it's get out of control. And as you said, for example, even if we push the emergency stop button, how is going to fall down, So having this, I think we still need times to reach that. But if they want to enter our lives, I would say they will enter the care home first and maybe educational settings. And maybe in several years, they will come to homes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's just about all the time we have for today. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to my guests, Maryam, Ben and Petar, for joining me for this fascinating discussion. Thank you to the amazing audience for your interesting and insightful questions. And finally, I'd like to thank the Great Exhibition Road Festival team and the staff here at Imperial College for having us and for making sure that everything ran smoothly in the background.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy Robot Talk, please share the podcast, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps boost the podcast, so thanks in advance. And make sure you check out @Robot Talk Pod on social media to see the panelists' photos that we discussed in the episode. This is the final episode of Season 5, so I'm going to be taking a well-deserved break over the summer. But I'm excited to say that Robot Talk will be returning for a 6th season in September. And don't worry, I'll still be posting behind-the-scenes updates, bonus episodes, and upcoming guest announcements over on Patreon throughout the summer. So make sure you join the Robot Talk community at patreon.com/Claire Asher to be notified about all that cool stuff. You can also subscribe to the Robot Talk newsletter, check out robottalk.org, or follow @RobotTalkPod on social media for the opportunity to have your say about what topics I should cover more in Season 6, and to be the first to hear about the new season when it launches. So, all that remains is for me to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon supporters, to the amazing guests that have made this season so interesting and fun, and to all the listeners for making my job worthwhile. It's been so much fun making this season, and I hope you'll join me again for the next. Until then, I've been Claire Asher, and this has been Robot Talk. Robot Talk is brought to you by the Hamlin Centre, Imperial College London.